It is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 14, Episode 26.
It is.
Wow. Adam Collins, Jeff Fleming, we sure make a lot of this show. This is the weekly show. This is the one where we talk about everything other than the men's Ashes, which has been such a focus of our attention. Up at Manchester, now back at London, a couple of days away from the Oval Test, and now we can spread our wings a wee bit.
It's the only one where we actually count the episode numbers. Storytime has its own episode numbers. The daily shows, thank God, don't have episode numbers because that would be terrifying. I think we're around 750 episodes now. But these are the ones, the weekly ones, they get counted once a week, and there might be the odd interview in there that gets counted. Might be a couple a week. And so that's 26 since this season started, which was the start of the northern summer in around about the start of April.
This will be the last time I have a chance to say to you, come to our live show. We've got Steve Finn with us on Wednesday night. If you're listening to this...
Might be sold out already.
It might be sold out. It's plausible it'll be sold out, but there'll be a link in the show notes and you can find out that way. Vinny's with us. If you become a patron of ours, which we'll talk more about later after Nerd Pledge, you get a 15 quid ticket, a half price ticket. The Phoenix in Soho is a belter of a venue, and we're doing it in association with the Lord's Tavern. Some of the best people in the cricketing community. All we ask of you is to sign up to the Tabs mailing list to learn all about what they do. If not for that, I wouldn't have learnt about the Edinburgh Half Marathon, which raised, I think, £6,300 for them earlier this year. A number of people that ran that with me are going up to Edinburgh for the Final Word cricket matches on the 22nd and 23rd of August. A number of them will be playing for the Final Word against Oval Dream Boys, Oval Dream Bees, on probably, whisper it, the 22nd of September. We've nearly got that finalised.
Really?
Nearly got that finalised. So this hive of activity around what we're doing at the moment and the work we're doing with the Tabs around the live show with Finny folds all into that. So jump on, hit the link, buy a ticket, meet us on Wednesday.
Go to Patreon, get it half price. I'll see if I can post up a couple of snippets from the live show on there just for the patron people.
Nice.
That might, if I can figure out a way to do that. Don't hold me to it. This is a promise with no basis. And we're also still working on getting the ad-free feed up on Patreon. That's been delayed because we've just been completely swamped with the Ashes and the Ashes and also the Ashes. But that's in train as well. We're still trying to get that going. That will hopefully be resolved pretty soon.
So admin aside, we've got loads to get through today. We haven't had a chance to have a conversation about the Women's Ashes finale yet, so we'll do that. The Bangladesh-India Women's Crazy Series and the fallout from that with Harmanpreet Kaur, the Indian captain. A death in Australian cricket during the week. We'll have some Nerd Pledge. We'll be talking about Ian Botham and poking some fun there in all probability. The County Championship had a round last week. There's been test matches between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. And last but not least, a conversation with Alice Davison-Richards, the England all-rounder who made 100 on debut last year against South Africa, but talking in her capacity as an ambassador for Alzheimer's Association. It's called the Alzheimer's Society, rather, who are the charitable partner of the Oval Test match coming up this week. And Alice has got an interesting story to tell, and she's a great person. So that comes up in segment 3.
100 on debut and got left out. Brutal.
I know.
The brutal selection
I
policy.
know. We talk about that. I promise you that comes up.
If we were writing a clickbait headline, we could be like, brutal move from English selectors. Leaves star shocked.
That could be our show notes.
Yeah, brutal act.
Yeah, ADR takes machine gun to selectors. She really doesn't. That's not what happens. She's very measured and reasonable about what happened around the Women's Ashes Test. But look, the way the series finished, we were all so plugged into those one-day internationals.
Oh, man.
I'm pleased that the Test was first to give those white ball matches more texture, which worked. I think Test going first. Some people said to me in my replies, wouldn't it have been great had the Test gone last? I don't think so, because so much has played out by that point. It can mean both sides play for the draw.
What we've seen almost every time that's happened is that one team has more of an incentive for a draw in the Test than the other.
Exactly.
And therefore, it skews the way that it gets played.
Yep.
No better example than Meg Lanning in 2019 saying, well, we don't need to win the Test. We've already won 3 ODIs. All we need to do is draw it and we're done. And that's what they played to do.
And the 5-day Test match meant the result there, right? So, I want to carefully balance what I'm saying here. It was the greatest Women's Ashes multi-format point series yet. It had so many twists and turns. The very fact that it was live until the penultimate game, but much as it is with the men, they go to the final match with a chance to level the series. Gold. The way England did it, and did it in style, even better. They probably should have celebrated on stage together. They probably should have said, this has been a drawn series. I think the retention thing, Gideon Haig's been talking about this on his podcast with Lawler last night. I saw a clip go up on Twitter saying that even with men's cricket, retention feels a bit antiquated.
Yep.
Like the idea of retaining something. How about if neither side wins and it's a drawn series and that be that? Okay, I get why that'll never happen with the men, but I reckon it could happen with the women. There are so many games of cricket, 7 of them, that if there's not an outright winner after 7 games and 3 formats, maybe we should just simply have the trophy shared like happens in so many sports around the world.
I also think that the draw is okay. It's okay to draw. The draw has been part of cricket since the beginning as well, usually just because there wasn't enough time to get a result. But running out of opportunity to get a result in terms of the number of matches that you have scheduled to play is the same as running out of time to get a result within a match. You were not able to establish a clear winner. Now, you could tweak the number of points and so on, and I'm not good enough at arithmetic to work out a system where you'd be unlikely to end up with a tied
Funny you
total
mention
at the
this,
end of that.
because my system actually would have been a draw anyway this time.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So
and many people brought that up on Twitter with me, and that's fine. The one I had before, 5 points for the test win, 1.5 points for the draw, 3 for a one-day win, 2 for a T20 win. That would have seen both sides at 10 points. However,
anything that's a draw means that the points are split, which means that then you still have, if you've got ODIs and T20s, you can change the relative points, but you'll still end up, 3 and 3 is 6, and 3 times 2 is 6.
Exactly.
There are still ways to end up levelling things out. But we are not arithmetical enough to solve this, but somebody, just get fractions involved.
It would, either get fractions involved, which is an easy way of doing it, make the test
Make it as simple as net run rate. We want cricket to bring in new people, make it easy to understand.
Someone who I respect a great deal made the point to me that when I've been arguing for 5 points for the test, what I'm missing here is that women, the format they play most is 20 over cricket, and saying a test is worth 2.5 times a T20 may not be quite right.
I think that is right, because a T20 is easier to have an upset in.
This is where I would say
that's the
one tweak to what I said last week is maybe I would go 4 points for the test win, 3 points for the one-day win, 2 points for the T20 win, and maybe the test to draw would still be at 1.5 or even 1 to disincentivise playing for the draw. Mm-hmm. Either way, there are ways of doing this. It does not detract at all, though, for what proved to be an absolute belter of a series, and in no small part, in fact, in large part, Nat Sciver-Brunt, one of our all-time favourites and the final word. I feel like we've been talking up Nat and talking about Nat since the day we started making this podcast. One of the best people in cricket too, and that she was able to have such an influence on it made me feel all warm inside.
The statistical run that she's been on purely against Australia is extraordinary. She has 998 runs against Australia in one-day cricket, having batted against them 22 times. People don't do this to Australia, right? Her record is basically the best against Australia compared to anybody else. She averages 62 with the bat against them across her career. Over her last 5 innings, however, this was the stat that you can actually do the brain exploding emoji for. When I had a feeling, I was like, hang on, this is an incredible streak here when she made that 100 in the final match, and I thought, well, who's made back-to-back hundreds against Australia before? Who's made 100 in consecutive ODI innings? I doubt anybody's done it. So I went and looked it up, and I was like, well, one person's done it, and that person is Nat Sciver-Brunt. And that was 1 innings prior to the one that started that streak, as in she made 2 consecutive hundreds, 1 non-hundred, and then 2 more consecutive hundreds. 27 one-day centuries in total have been made against the Australian women's team in the entire time they've been playing. So since 1973, when Enid Bakewell made the first one against Australia. I imagine in that World Cup
it might have been.
Yeah, the opening round, wasn't it? There was one in the final and...
Oh, sorry, right. I know about the one in the final. I wasn't sure about the one before then. Okay.
Because she made one on debut as well, Enid Bakewell. So that must have been the first one-day ton against Australia. A few players have made 2, Chamari Adapatu and Amy Satterthwaite,
and a couple of others.
And Sarah Taylor. Claire Taylor's got a couple as well, I think. So, but one player's got 3, or had 3 before Nat Sciver-Brunt in the last few weeks, and that was Susie Bates, and that was it. Nat Sciver-Brunt has 4, so more than everybody else. So out of the 27, she's made 4 of them, but she's made 4 of them in her last 5 innings against Australia. She's averaging 264 in her last 5 innings.
Wow.
She's been not out in 3 of those hundreds. 3 of them were well over a runner ball. The 100 that was under a runner ball is the only one that's come in a winning effort. So Australia have kept beating England despite these remarkable innings from her. So she was going at a strike rate of 86 in the one at Taunton, and that was the winning 100. It levels up the series. It gives England something to cheer about. And, obviously people who hate draws are now extremely annoyed.
That's number one. I think that to come back on that point from before, that England should take an enormous amount from this. They were a side 12 months ago who were beaten convincingly by India, albeit a depleted India, a depleted England, I should say, missing Heather Knight, missing Nat Sciver-Brunt. Amy Jones was leading that team. They failed to make the gold medal game of the Commonwealth Games at home. They got bounced out of the bronze medal game for that matter. So that they needed to regroup and find a different way. And I'm not surprised that it's been through Sciver-Brunt, who was so upbeat before this series about her generation that have come through. She's 30 now, right? I think Heather Knight might be 1 year older than her. There's a group of them who've been together for ages. It was a 6-year anniversary of the Women's World Cup win at Lord's. I think yesterday was the 6th anniversary of it, something like that. And you go through the team sheet. There aren't that many who are left. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and they are the nucleus of this team. Effectively, the leadership axis of Knight and Sciver-Brunt, right
Danny
middle
Wyatt.
of that, Danny Wyatt, Tammy Beaumont. Or Wyatt didn't play in that final; she was a squad member. But your point stands. Tammy Beaumont, of course, who was the player of that tournament. But nevertheless, they are desperate to have success against Australia. And this constitutes something verging on that. And look, they probably won't beat Australia in Australia, but they'll have belief. That they had an 8-all draw against them in 2017, which was a come-from-behind effort winning the T20 series. They've now won 2 white ball series against Australia. That will give them enormous confidence going into next multilateral tournament, the next time they come up against each other in Australia. It's good for global cricket that Australia's dominance is now being kept in check somewhat by England. Because if not for that, then unfortunately, it was getting a little bit boring. We in order for Australia's success to be completely meaningful, it needs to be against a side, and it's going to be England in the short term who can duke it out with them.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's Australia doing kind of the ultimate heel thing as well, like the Sputnik Monroe kind of thing, because you can't quite beat them. Like, you won the T20 series, you won the ODI series, but they still managed to just scrape away enough points. They still managed to prevail in the test match, and they end up hanging on to the trophy at the end. It's an interesting one. I don't mind the retaining thing. I think if a team has the trophy, the other team has to take it off them, and that's the fundament of how it works.
Yeah, with so many games, there's probably a better way to do it. So the probability of a draw is lowered. But I think we've gone over that enough for one Women's Ashes series.
Yes. Now, the other series that was going on, there was a T20 and an ODI series between Bangladesh and India as well.
Yeah.
This is an interesting rivalry because, of course, Bangladesh knocked them off in the Asia Cup final in 2018. They're very much a mismatch, in terms of the amount of funding and support and so on that the Bangladesh women's team gets. Very old school conditions in Bangladesh, lots of spin, lots of low scores, which is when that Bangladesh side can start to compete once they can squeeze the scores down, I suppose. So they lose the first 2 to T20s. They win the third one, which is an important result for them, keep India to 102 and chase it. First ODI, they bowl out India for 113, defending 152. India thrashed them in the second game, so it's sort of back to form. And then the third match, this stands out because Bangladesh made 225. That's the second highest score they've ever made in women's one-day cricket. They're much more a bowling side than a batting side. Significant there. And then India are chasing it. Smriti Mandana makes 59. Harleen Deol makes 77. She gets run out. Wickets start to fall. India are 6 down with 9 runs to get, needing 225. Wicket at 216, wicket at 217, another wicket at 217, and then with scores level, Meghna Singh is caught behind. Marufa Akhtar, the seamer who takes the wicket, gets the outside edge. So they tie the match, and they tie the series because under the playing conditions they're supposed to have a super over, but they've run out of time on the day. The umpires say there's not enough time left to play the super over.
With bad light, I assume,
whether it was light or whether they were just past the end of the allotted time for the match.
Just judging by the live stream I caught the end of, it must have been
dark.
light. Yeah.
So they don't play the super over. They have a tied series, and India are not happy be at all.
Well, there are so many bits to this, right? So let's start at the top. Harmanpreet Kaur, when she was dismissed, and I know it was given as caught at slip, which if she hit it, it was clearly caught at slip. If she didn't, it was plum leg before. Either way, she was out, right? So let's
we've had a look at the replays on this, and it looks pretty out.
Either way, she's out.
So she thought she was given LBW and was angry at that, thinking it was sliding down leg. I don't know,
No.
but she was hit on the full.
Yeah,
by
it's out.
a spinner looking towards the stumps. Whether or not
No
it's
DRS.
out, she thinks it's LBW. There's no DRS. She doesn't realise it's given as a catch, and then she cracks the shits deluxe
Smacks the stumps over.
with her bat.
Isn't the first person to do that, but isn't it funny that we can rattle off the people who've done it? You know,
Rodney Hogg.
We all know the cricketers in the men's game who've been so angry as to kick or whack the stumps over with their bat or with their feet. There's a reason for that. It's because it's appalling behaviour, and it's inexcusable. We talk about spirit of cricket when referring to the technicalities of a ball touching the turf and that kind of thing. The spirit of cricket is designed. The preamble to the laws of the game has been written, and this was a Colin Cowdery thing before he passed away, specifically about respecting umpires. 90% of the spirit of cricket preamble deals with respecting umpires and respecting the game.
And taking the rough with the smooth.
Taking the rough with the smooth, and that's the energy of the spirit of cricket if you want to take it literally to what's written down. This is completely in contravention of that. I cannot believe she wasn't charged with bringing the game into disrepute for that alone. And then is what she said after play. Then there's the way in which she brought the umpire's integrity into question repeatedly. There was the commentary around the BCB not treating the High Commissioner suitably. Are you serious? There are so many pieces to this, and each of them are dreadful. It was laughing at the Bangladeshi players when they were leaving the stage, when they formed something of a protest, saying to the Bangladeshi captain, Nigar Sultana, that she shouldn't be there receiving the praise and the presentation. It should be the umpires, not her, because the umpires had them in a position to tie that game. There are so many disgraceful bits of behaviour in all of that. And what was the penalty?
75%.
75% of the match fee.
Across two different charges, one for the stumps, one for the comments, where she said the umpiring was pathetic. The sad part in this is that it detracts from Bangladesh having this moment where they have something to celebrate. But the Bangladesh women's team doesn't get a lot to celebrate, and they had a moment, they've achieved something in front of their home crowds. They're feeling like people are going to start paying attention to their team, and I don't know, maybe this helps in a way. Maybe it helps draw attention, but it's not in a good way.
I hope so. Nigar Sultana Jyoti, as she's known sort of around the circuit, she spoke so well after the game to Mohammed Issam. I'm not sure if it was a press conference or whether Issam, who we've had on the show a number of times, sort of the narrator of Bangladeshi cricket, had interviewed her separately. But either way, that idea that we've been dying to get this kind of attention and we've gotten it for what we've done on the field, drawing level with India. It's a shame that a lot of people would first be coming into contact with this team on the back of what Harmanpreet's done.
Yep.
What have you got to do to be charged with bringing the game into disrepute? I mean, what does it take? You can be very, very cynical about this, and I'm going to try and tread the line here. But who else? No, I'm not even going to bother because it'll just make people angry. But are we serious? We all know what's really happened here, don't we? We all really know what's happened here.
Would other players have got away with this?
Of course not.
Is what you're talking about.
Of course not.
And I'm going to say as well, Smriti Mandana, who's usually a very level-headed, good citizen, doubles down on this in the press conference after the
Because
game.
they wanted to win, right? Why did she do it? Because they wanted to win.
Well, this is... So here's a line. This happened, says Mandana, because Harmanpreet, the quote is, she was given out and she felt that she wasn't out. So that's why that happened. Yeah, no shit. Who is given out and thinks that they're out? Nobody thinks that they're out when they're
out. But that's not a permission structure for belting the stumps over
Yeah.
and for talking to and about the umpires this way and for disrespecting the Bangladeshi captain this way. Because she was pissed off at getting out. No one gets away with that.
So Mandana goes on to say, when you really want that W on the board for India, these things happen. No, they don't. They only happen if you allow them to happen. And then she says this, we kind of expected a little better level of umpiring in terms of some decisions, because it was very evident when there was not even a second thought given when the ball was hitting the pad when our batters are batting. And then she goes on to say, next time, hopefully we have neutral umpires.
Well, she should go as well.
So
she should go as well. She should also be charged for those comments.
She's completely doubled down on saying that the umpires are corrupt and that they've thrown a game because they're Bangladeshi umpires. Now,
it's a disgrace.
I mean, it is actually really, really grim. So Tanvir Ahmed is the umpire who gave the Harmanpreet decision, and one of the other contentious ones. I think it was the final wicket to fall. He's an experienced umpire. He's umpired a bunch of T20 internationals and ODIs, has been around the circuit. You're not a professional umpire who's willing to throw games for a team. If you do that, your career ends. If you do that, it gets found out very quickly. It's very evident if you're consistently giving wrong decisions in favour of one team or another.
This is not the bad old days of when umpires were appointed by the home board. And I acknowledge there weren't neutral umpires in this. Fine. But
there haven't been neutral umpires in tests since COVID started.
No, I understand, but I'm zooming out from this. I get that neutral umpires are something that was necessary. You know, Harsha Bhogle speaks really well around this. At the time when neutral umpires were brought in, every time a side went away from home, India in 91, 92 in Australia, were mortified at the way they were treated by the Australian umpires.
Sure.
Australia, when they went to India and Pakistan through the 80s and 90s, you'd always hear the same consistent patter about home umpires. That completely changed when the ICC took control of the operation, when it wasn't about home boards appointing umpires. This is an antiquated idea that we rock up in a country and we're triggered because the other country is cheating. No one says that anymore because that simply does not happen.
Yeah, it is not true when you've got professional umpires who are there to do a job and they want to get their stats as correct as possible so that they get promoted,
exactly.
so that their career advances. You don't get in there so that you can try to help your team win a game or not win a game.
And it's not your team anyway. You're an umpire for a reason. You've got to trust the professional integrity of these umpires who do a bloody tough job as it is, not needing to be heavy by Harmanpreet, who is clearly got a short fuse. We've seen her crack the shits about any number of things before, and I admire passionate cricketers. You know, we all do. We all want to see players out there becoming, expressing themselves as they see fit. But there is a line that is specified in any playing condition that you want to put a finger at about the way you need to treat officials.
Yep.
And that disrespect of having the Bangladesh players come up on stage to sledge Jyoti, and then for them to go, you know what? We're not going to take this, and walk off the stage and then sneer at them when they're walking back to the dressing room. The bit about the High Commissioner, I mean, this is just ridiculous. I couldn't even understand what she was saying about the High Commissioner.
Yeah.
Just fuming with rage, and maybe she does feel like she's above the game, that she can do whatever she wants, that she is now too big to fail. And maybe that's been validated by the fact that the ICC only saw fit to levy her a 75% match fee fine. If they were fair income, she would have been suspended for a lengthy stretch of time.
Yep.
To make a point to every other captain around the world is not acceptable.
And imagine if Stokes or Cummins gets up after one of those Ashes tests and says, "Oh, the umpires are corrupt. We need to change the umpires for the next Test match because they're giving every decision out against us."
Or if Ben Stokes got the bat and whacked the stumps over.
Yeah. I mean, it would be an international incident.
Of course it would, and rightly so.
And nobody's paying a great deal of attention to this, and very little will happen. So that's the situation as it is. Who knows if there'll be any follow-up from that? But yeah, the bit I was most surprised about was Mandana getting involved with time to take a breath, with time to think about what was happening next, and to still back up the absurdity and try to support her captain there.
There was a death in Australian cricket during the week. Brian Tabor passed away. The great New South Wales wicketkeeper. He was in the team of the century for New South Wales. Back when glovemen were glovemen, Jeff, when what you did with the bat didn't matter an awful lot. Played 16 test matches.
Batted 11 if you want, as long as you're good with the gloves.
Yeah, and played 16 test matches. In that era between Wally Grout and Rod Marsh. He and Barry Jarman are in the middle of that. He played in England, played in that 4-0 loss in South Africa, which is when they moved on to Rod Marsh. But was always seen...
Wally Grouse.
Yes.
as he's known on the final word, and that Jarman bit where Jarman ended up captaining as well.
He did.
So he was on that anomalous sort of keeper captains list that we had. We had the Tim Payne, Barry Jarman keeper captain bit, and then we did the Pat Cummins, Ray Lindwall fast bowler captain bit.
Yeah, and for Tabor's part, he never was able to really bed down a spot in the Aussie team, but he left a massive legacy on Australian cricket, both as coach and selector at New South Wales and the coach of the Aussie 19. So a lot of the guys who are kind of in their 40s and 50s now, who formed the guts of the golden generation of Australian cricket, played when Brian Tabor was the manager of the 19s, and the medal that's given out well before he passed away, the medal given out to the player of the under 19s tournament played between the states each year is known as the Brian Tabor Medal. So 16 test matches between 1966 and 1970. The greatest wicketkeeper, the greatest gloveman New South Wales ever produced, Varley, Brian Tabor.
And there was a big tribute from Darren Berry as well, who's had a very busy week on social media, Darren Berry, but some of it a bit more positive than others, and his memories of Brian Tabor and what he did for a new generation of wicket keepers coming through was probably on the better end of his social media output.
Jeff, before we go to our first break today, we'll have time just for a tiny, and don't wake up my daughter, a little bit of...
Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. Peggy's asleep upstairs, Peggy Antonio, so let's not wake her up with a Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge is a game that we play with all the nice people who listen to this show, who decide to help support it. They go to Patreon, they send us a donation, a contribution, and that amount is a number that relates to cricket in some way. For instance, Jeremy Nash has sent through £1.35. So 1.35 is the number. It means something. We have to work out what it means. Okay,
so Jeremy sent a clue to you, Jeff. In a match featuring a noteworthy debut, a famous return, and the run out of a final word fave, this contribution by my boyhood hero was the most significant.
It all ties together. We're talking about wicket keepers. We interviewed Dennis Amos on the show a few months ago. This is a match that we spoke about with Dennis Amos because Dennis Amos wasn't in it. He was in the previous one, but he wasn't in this one. Third test of the 1977 Ashes at Trent Bridge. I suspect you know where I'm going with this. The first test is drawn. The second one, England win. They secure the Ashes by winning the third test. Australia start all right. Rick McCosker, 51. Ian Davis, 33 at the top of the order. On debut is a fellow who will come up a bit later in the show, Ian Botham. He gets Greg Chappell out. He gets Doug Walters out. He gets Rod Marsh out. He was a wicketkeeper too. En route to 5 wickets on debut, Kerry O'Keefe makes 48 not out, gets them up to 243. Very England Test cricket score, isn't it? 243.
Yeah.
Batting first, 243. Second team makes 225.
It's a comfortable score. 243 all out is the kind of score that strikes you as like that. That's the kind of day of cricket I would have loved to have been at.
The famous return, Jeff Boycott, is coming back into the team after 3 years sulking, and he replaces Dennis Amos.
They didn't make me captain.
Didn't make me captain.
Didn't make me captain. Don't want to face Michael Holding. Didn't make me captain.
Well, he did come back and face Jeff Thompson.
Of course he did. Of course he did. I mean, I think there was at the time the suggestion was that there was a certain reluctance to, you can read about this in John Houghton's book.
You can. So he comes back and he makes a boycott-style 100. He makes 107 from 315 balls. Now, I should have mentioned earlier that in the Bangladesh game, when they made their second highest score, they also had the first century ever made by a Bangladesh woman in ODI cricket, which was also 107. So there's a bit of a 107 theme, the way that things went today. So Fargana Hoque made Bangladesh's first 100, which is a nice moment for her as well. Probably doesn't necessarily want to be twinned with Jeff Boycott and his 107, but I'll leave that up to her to decide. On the way to the 107 is the famous run out of Derek Randall. There's the final word fave, centenary test, say no more. Derek Randall gives himself up in order to let Boycott keep batting.
That's the piece of commentary with Arlott describing it as a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
And Richie Benaud saying some years later, nothing that happens on a cricket field is...
Whisper it. Benaud used to describe things as tragedy as well.
Did he? Oh.
Yeah, whisper it. We found that during calling the shots, Daniel and I doing research. A couple of times Benaud slipped into that. But we won't go into, we won't throw him under the bus.
Well, the match report says this. In the end, Randall sacrificed his wicket to save Boycott, who stood dejected, covering his face with his hands. Boycott freely admitted that he was to blame, and he continued to defend with the utmost resolution. So there's a little apologia there. But around that dismissal Thompson and Lenny Pascoe are doing the damage. They take a couple of wickets each. So England are 5 for 82 when Boycott is joined by Alan Knott. And who better to have as a childhood hero if you were growing up at the time than the man with the gloves, beautiful hands, and could also make runs. Alan Knott was a very decent operator with the bat. So the report says, Knott rose to the occasion in his own impudent style. So he's pretty much matched Boycott in the 80s by stumps, despite coming out, Boycott's opening and he's coming out at number 7. Beats him to 100, goes on to the highest score by an England wicketkeeper, helps put on 215 before Thompson gets Boycott out. They add another 29 before Alan Knott gets out, so that gets England to 364. And then Rick McCosker goes full Boycott, Hoke, and makes 107. Everybody's making hundreds and sevens today. Kerry O'Keefe, 21 not out. He's batting well in this test. Mike Hendrick goes through them this time, takes 5 for, sort of works through them for 309, so they need 189 to win. Brearley gets out. They promote Alan Knott up the order to go and pinch hit. Doesn't work. He gets out. Tony Gregg gets out, but Boycott and Derek Randall finish it off together. They end up not out at the end, and after Knott is out, they're not out, if that makes sense. And so they've made up. Match Report says Boycott batted across all 5 days. I'm finding more of these players. So a little while ago we were thinking that there were only a couple, but there must be more.
We had Kawaja, didn't we?
Yeah,
and
but this is in an Ashes test, so it couldn't have been with the Ashes filter on. Anyway.
Did we have a Stan McCabe in there?
We didn't have a Stan McCabe. We had a Kim Hughes in the centenary test in 1980.
That's right.
But I've seen a couple of other instances when reading in the last couple of weeks. So who knows? I haven't gone and verified that. But that's what it says. And it also says this, which I enjoyed. These are the Wisden reports of the time. Moreover, the large crowds were perfectly behaved, a pleasant contrast to the rowdyism and noise which had so often prevailed in recent years at some test matches. Well, they wouldn't have liked being at Lord's this year.
They wouldn't have liked being in any of the
they probably
test
would have
matches.
joined in,
Yeah, maybe so. They wouldn't have liked them. Yeah, it's become increasingly a part of the test experience in England. It's very rowdy, but that's okay with me.
So 135, that's the score that Alan Knott made to save the day in the 3rd test and retain the Ashes. No, they wouldn't have, because they wouldn't have had them at that point. 70, 77, they would have lost them in 75.
I am reluctant to say
Go on the
with
record.
authority one way or the other because I'm not going to let my brain kick in to that full nerd mode at the moment.
Is there a series in Australia
So
between 75
two all in
and 77?
1972.
Yeah.
Australia
win in
1974, 75.
Which would mean they would have retained the Ashes if
But
they
not
had
won
them.
it. Yes.
But they didn't have them?
No, because they played the consecutive series in 75 and then again in 77 without going to Australia because of
Why did that happen?
World Cup of 75. So Australia stuck around.
And just played an Ash.
So they
But
played.
they would have been due for an Ashes.
Well, they played in
anyway.
72. So 72, then 75 when the World Cup was on. They stuck around in 77. So they were already a bit off
So
kilter.
they went a year early.
Yeah, or they went a year late, depending on how you want to. Because 72 was the previous series before 75. So in theory, it would have been 76. But
Right.
they were already there in 75. So
they-
they went in 77 instead and got back on cycle after that.
Oh, they get back on the odd years.
Back on the odd
After
years.
that.
But
But
there are quirks like that through. If you go through the Ashes history, it's not always on the 4-year.
Well, no, I know. There's 13, 14, 15.
Oh, that's a good example of
you
that.
know.
But there's one in the, this will test me. There was one where, so 1956 is followed by 1961. So there were instances where we've had odd years and it's not always been 4. But we do get back on 4-year cycles after 77. But yeah, as you say, it would have required Australia winning the 4th and the 5th.
Yeah.
And they don't. England win the series 3-0.
And there's the non-Ashes in 1980 as
Which
well,
is-
which is
because-
3 tests, which is post-Packer.
But yeah, anyway,
Yeah, it's confusing. It's confusing, very confusing. In that, you may be interested to know, Steve Smith has passed Alan Border's total of Ashes runs, but not his runs against England.
Yes.
Alan Border played about 5 test matches, I reckon, that were not Ashes.
Centenary tests of
Bicentenary.
1980, bicentenary test.
It's probably 6.
Yeah, he wouldn't have played in 77. He hadn't debuted by then, but he would have played one centenary test, a bicentenary test. A few test matches.
5.
It doesn't matter. Patreon.com/the final word if you like what we do. If you want to support myriad podcasts that we're making at the moment. They will continue. Maybe you found us during the Ashes series and you're kind of thinking about whether you'll keep hanging out with us later. If you become a member of our Patreon page, that also gets you access to Discord. Discord is where all the action happens with our wonderful Final Word community. We had another meet-up on Saturday night at a pub in Sale that Guy Hornsby organised, which was bloody lovely. So, and we'll keep doing that. We've got another one at the Oval this week, which has nothing to do with you and me. That's all organised by our community, and we just slip in and out as we can. And also the cricket games in Edinburgh that I mentioned before. There's still room. If you really want to play in Edinburgh on the 22nd or 23rd and go to the Fringe Festival between the 21st and the 24th, do let me know as soon as you can.
Let's take a break. After that, what's going on in England?